One of the perks of my job is I get to talk to history makers, and the one that came to mind most as I thought about this conversation was an interview I conducted with the Nobel laureate, the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa, who I asked at a time of great turmoil in South Africa. He'd been very, very critical of what was happening with the government to the country that he helped forge with Nelson Mandela. And I asked, are you an optimist about the future of the country? And he said, I am not an optimist, I am a prisoner of hope. And I've really taken that to the bank in many ways. We have on the stage here 3 agents of hope, people that we learned a lot about last night, and I am hoping that we can get a little more granular detail of how it is you do your work. You do your work in a spectacular range of geography, a range of capacity. We heard earlier today that disparity that ranges from Ukraine at 99% digital literacy and literacy to a country like South Sudan, which has been decimated by decades of war. And I'll throw out the first question probably to you, Marwa, since I get the sense that you're more of the implementer in this group. But I had a conversation with them earlier, and they tend to finish each other's sentences. So I'm going to direct general questions and have you finish each other's questions and thoughts here. Is there a denominator that informs the work you do in such a diverse geography?
So the fact that Can't Wait to Learn is contextualized in most of the countries where we implemented, the fact that it's co-created with the children, with teachers, with the community actors, this is one of the unique selling points of the program. So it's always endorsed by ministries. We get the approval from the Curriculum Development Center on the content. And then we also get feedback from teachers, from the community actors, and on the design. It's the children who really choose how do the games look like. So you would see the games in different countries in Africa region, for example, similar, looking like the context where children live in, similar to their reality, actually. Same in the Middle East, same in Ukraine. So they are the ones who choose the characters in the game. They are the ones who choose how the sense and the feel of the game, the landscape, how does it look like. Also with teachers and with the community actors, they are the ones who give us the feedback. And this is what helps us in creating these games that are contextualized and aligned, whether in content or in design.
You know, one of the things that you mentioned yesterday that really struck me is the common need for children amid all their circumstances to have structure, to have routine. For many of us in this room, a disruption might be, a missed school bus or one that comes late. But it's hard to imagine what these children endure when they're displaced, during war. But you have found that structure and routine is just as important amid all the turmoil that they face in their lives.
Of course. So to children living in conflict where there are all these constant changes with the trauma that they live, with the instability that they live, bringing not only education but routine into their lives brings again a sense of normalcy to them. It really brings this sense of hope about the future because again, they feel that they are able to do some of the day-to-day things that they are used to. It brings them more of stability. So yeah, of course, this routine is a catalyst in bringing more stability to children's lives.
If either of you want to jump in, feel free to do so before we move on.
I wouldn't mind. Thanks,
Sure.
Thanks, Marwa. First, that response. I think one of the important things to keep in mind is that in conflict-affected settings, so often a sense of control is taken away from children, from adults. So being able to have a sense of control again is actually very protective. And getting just normal routines again, getting that normalization that Marwa is talking about does give a sense of control, and I think that is an important protective factor. So I think that's what you're talking to.
Having said that, they are dealing with enormous challenges that can affect the mental health of children and, in fact, their physical safety. And you've taken that into account and in fact, come up, a lot of your research, Mark, concerns a holistic approach that takes into account the mental health challenges, the lack of facilities to deal with them, for example. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important question. Maybe one step back. I think if you're looking at what the impact of war and violence does on children, on communities, it disrupts education systems, it breaks families, it leads indeed to a lot of mental health problems, not in the least because of exposure to traumatic events. We see an increase in child abuse and maltreatment. So there's these multiple pathways by which war affects children and their well-being. So if we really truly want to improve the well-being or the resilience of children, it's not enough to have this single intervention approach. And even, I dare say, even just education, as powerful as it is not enough. And that's why we're saying you need to come at it from a more systemic angle by bringing different interventions together. So if I can just unpack that a little bit, if we really want to improve the education of children, and we all want that, we're saying, yeah, we also need to address the mental health of children to really make them ultimately have more resilient and better well-being. And the two, there's a bidirectional relationship, of course. So if you have better mental health, we see that there's better educational outcomes, and vice versa. So if there's better educational outcomes, it leads to better mental health. And that's why we say and this would be really our plea, is to say, well, take a whole school approach. So if you do improve education outcomes through, for example, Can't Wait to Learn, do it together with interventions that address the mental health needs of children by simple mental health promotion activities, or by having school counselors being able to deliver simple treatments in the school, by addressing the well-being of teachers. So that's maybe what we're after.
I want to get back to this notion of the varied circumstances of the many theaters in which you function. When you look to design programs, I mean, how do you take into account that variation as you make games for kids?
You don't assume you know it, is the first start.
Don't assume you know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And War Child works through partners, and often those partners are much better, and they understand the context in which we're working better than we do. And so it's a partnership process that gives you insights into what type of game is needed, what type of implementation modality is needed. And that has to be a two-way dialogue and a consistent one, right down to teacher and child level. And it has to start from a position where you accept that you don't know, and you need to work with those who do know to build that understanding. And to be fair, the previous teams at Can't Wait to Learn, and moving forward now, the current team, we take context incredibly seriously. Sometimes with digital work and education, it's easy to overlook that. You look for a more scalable model, perhaps, and you don't do the hard yards. You don't make sure the game looks like and reflects the world that the children are part of. And you don't align it to national curriculums, because that's quite an arduous exercise, because it's potentially doing that means you create a product and a service and a program that is of that context. And if you mix that with partnerships, that are closer to being equitable, then you're moving in the right direction to address the needs that exist.
Do you have to, well, let me put it this way, how do you set goals in the various theaters when you know the context in which all of this is unfolding? I imagine that you're measuring the loss of learning, the readiness to learn in these various theaters. Talk a little bit about how you set goals and what those goals are when you enter into an intervention.
Yeah, I can speak to part of that, and my colleagues will certainly add. For something like Can't Wait to Learn, we do research and we evaluate the effectiveness. So are we achieving the goals that we think that an intervention such as Can't Wait to Learn has? So we, even in the difficult circumstances where we work, we run, and we just ran a randomized controlled trial in order to demonstrate, does Can't Wait to Learn improve literacy and numeracy skills? And being able to demonstrate that you can actually achieve these outcomes is very much the goal of a intervention such as Can't Wait to Learn. If you're taking it at a higher level and looking at a combination of interventions, I think you want to see that ultimately children have better well-being and even have longitudinal better outcomes, so that the investment that we're doing now in children's education, in children's well-being, really translates to healthier communities, and that translates in the longer run. Now, in all fairness, that level we haven't been able to demonstrate yet. Not us, but I think also not by other groups. And I think that's a goal that needs further investment. What we are doing and what we're able to do is looking at the individual interventions, and do they have the outcomes that we aim to have? And mostly they do, sometimes they don't, and then we need to change and adapt and revise.
Did you want to add anything to that?
No, Mark's very eloquent on that. But also, it's very important to have peer-reviewed research that goes to that level, that demonstrates the impact. But also, and without wanting to sound glib, what we think is important is, of course, important, we're involved with it, not really the primary piece. The government's duty bearers within those contexts are the people who should decide and do decide what's the most important goals for their education system, goals in maybe a humanitarian response, could be the organisations within the UN, and as well as the duty bearers in government. And so we are their partners, and we have to listen, and should and do listen to what they want to see as a positive outcome. We're just contributors towards that. Can't Wait to Learn isn't going to scale across a context or a country without significant investment from government and middle-tier professionals across education systems, and all of that scaling infrastructure. We can play our part, but in terms of outcomes, the most important outcomes are the people who, the duty bearers in those contexts.
And the capacity building that happens in each of these has got to be a major undertaking as much as designing any of your games, am I correct?
Actually, we focus a lot on teachers' capacity building, and when we work with partners, of course, we're not working from scratch. That's why we call it capacity building. And as we always say, there's the learning that we also get from partners. However, when talking about educational technology, when working with local communities, and facilitators in these communities, of course, there's a huge need for the capacity building. That's why we do like a structured induction, trainings, and then follow up with the teachers. It's not only about the capacity building that happens, but there are always the middle tiers that follow up with those teachers, provide the needed support, the needed help, whether with the educational element or also the technological component. And maybe just to add to that, also the teachers' learning circles, the community of practice that is established, that also keeps on supporting the teachers in sharing knowledge and sharing experiences, sharing the challenges that they are facing, and the incredible solutions that they can come up with, which we learn from.
Just to add to it, we don't really want to be running that training, to be honest. The education professionals in the context in which we work are better served to train teachers. I think one of the issues with education technology at times is we focus far too much on the technology component of it and not the education bit. Like, you've got practitioners, teachers, it depends where you're at in a response, but in terms of the more development-focused or long-term impact of a conflict, you want to be working with teacher competency frameworks. Can't Wait to Learn is just an example of a digital personalized learning platform that can help children's learning. The most important thing is, how do you train teachers to have the professional self-efficacy and resilience to use digital tools to help them? It should make their life easier. And I used to be a teacher, so I wouldn't have wanted to do a training that didn't help me earn more money or improve my position as a teacher and so forth. And we shouldn't treat teachers as if they're somehow these altruistic wonders, right? It's a job. And so we should always contribute humbly to trying to support the government's goals or the key education actors. And Can't Wait to Learn can be an example in that work. But the broader goal is digital literacy and opportunities to obviously support children, but the teachers within it as well.
You also make a very concerted effort to design programs and games that are not foreign. How important is that in your modus operandi to prevent digital colonialism, as you put it? How critical, and talk a little bit about your efforts specifically to learn that cultural competence of the local situation.
Just very briefly, I think it's about co-creating games that aren't generic. They are products of that context. But we need to get better at it. Everyone in digital education support does as well. We're not there yet. Co-ownership of the game is something you really need to look at. In Ukraine, we're in the position where we're going to be handing Can't Wait to Learn across to the ministry to run long-term, full-term, which is the first time we've ever done that. So we've got a lot to learn. We're learning as we go. But it's about not trying to own everything. It is about giving it and letting it go and understanding it's an education resource like, a lot of other things are, and having the confidence to let go and trusting organizations and teachers and so forth to take it forward as they see fit.
You've talked about not creating parallel systems, and I think about your work in particular in Uganda, for example, where your approach might be seen as very different from what exists in that country's system. Just the notion of games is foreign to a system that I grew up in India. You played games on the playground, you studied in the classroom. And I just wonder how much of a learning curve that has represented for you and for educators in the system that they've been brought up in.
Yeah. So Can't Wait to Learn has been, for example, in Uganda, it has been used to support learners who were out of school, but also recently after the RCT was done in Uganda, we worked with the government on integrating Can't Wait to Learn to education as usual, and that's how Can't Wait to Learn acted as a supplementary tool. So children were still receiving their education as usual, but Can't Wait to Learn was helping or giving more space for teachers to be able to focus on children who needed more support, to be able to focus on differentiated learning, and also for learners to play on their own pace. And this was received very well, and actually the results that have come from the research have shown improvement in children's learning outcomes, in both reading and mathematics. And now, in the district where the RCT was done, there has been a handover for the local district government, and they are continuing the implementation of Can't Wait to Learn. Actually, they own it now, and we look at expanding that more and more all over the country. And also, we started the institutionalization process in Uganda. A concept note has been reviewed by different departments at the Ministry of Education. Most recently, it was at the Monitoring and Evaluation Department. That's something we are following up on, and at a later stage, Can't Wait to Learn can be part of the professional development that's provided in teachers' centers, where teachers get all the trainings around professional development, and they get their capacity building. And that's also relevant in other contexts like Jordan, also like Ukraine, and now we're working more on that in Lebanon.
You know, I want to go back to something that Alicia Herbert brought up earlier today, and that's the enormous disparity that exists between countries in sub-Saharan Africa, 1 out of 10 children being unable to read in primary school versus 9 out of 10 in OECD countries. And I wonder, Mark, from your research that you've done in Uganda, if you can unpack for us some of the elements that you might be able to provide, or that offer some promise to inch forward on that and close that gap.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question for me to answer for 2 reasons. One, because it's such a huge problem that takes, again, such an education system response. That
I just wonder if there were any insights that you gathered.
No, that I don't know. What I can say is that from our perspective, if you're able to develop interventions such as Can't Wait to Learn, and really there's other interventions similarly that can do the same. And if we can roll that out to exactly the group of children that actually doesn't have access to education now, and I think that is the beauty that something like Can't Wait to Learn can offer, is actually reaching children that do not have access to education. So Marwa earlier talked about how, for example, Can't Wait to Learn can be integrated into formal education and can serve as a way to enhance educational outcome. It can serve to provide teachers with more time to attend to children needing it more. That already can close a little bit of the educational gap. But I think the biggest gap is those that don't even have access to education. And in the context where we work, that can be because schools are just not functioning. Now, if you can get Can't Wait to Learn and digital education in their hands, literally, yes, that is a way to close that gap. We'll need a lot of implementation to close it significantly and meaningfully, but it is a tool to do so. And I think that's really what we're after, and also using the Yidan Prize, for example, in the context where we're working.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd just add that digital personalised learning in, let's say, particularly difficult, low-resource sub-Saharan African states is not going to be the answer. We're not tech evangelists sat here pretending that this is going to all of a sudden completely revolutionise education systems where schools struggle to have access to power. And it's a targeted intervention that in about 30 hours engagement can really help children get to the position when they can read small paragraphs and move on. Teachers probably like working with children who can read what's on the board, and that's what we should be looking at. It's just another education. It's a good one. We're fans, but it's an education intervention like anything else, and should be open to the same critique. It should be deployed specifically to help transitional age grades, and cost effectiveness is absolutely critical. There's no point creating a system or anything really that doesn't reflect the economic situation that governments find themselves in. And that requires us to be creative about how it's used and work with governments to answer the problems they want to have answered, as opposed to this idea of sometimes with education technology we talk about, oh, it's a complete replacement. I don't think there's enough of evidence for that, and so that's all part of the dialogue of using it the right way.
It is noteworthy to me because we heard earlier in the day about the infrastructure deficits in so much of sub-Saharan Africa, and you've been able to surmount that and bring technology into very remote parts of Chad and Sudan, for example, and make that benefit the community. And I want to go, as we approach the end here, to a couple of areas, and that is engaging the community. I think it was Mark Twain who said, "Never let school interfere with your education." And school is only a small part of a child's life. You have to engage with community. Talk a little bit about your efforts in that regard to get uptake, if you will.
I can give it a go. So, of course, it's a key to have this connection with the community. It's actually the door, to be able to implement such programs. You can't just simply come up with a program that we think that would work for children and just impose it there, right? It's always about what the communities need, and it's the feedback that they provide that always help us to do the needed improvements. Also, for example, for EdTech programs, we know that for parents hearing the word games, children playing games, it doesn't necessarily resonate to them with learning. So it's through the community that we could do the needed sensitization around that and introduce the idea of educational technology. This is one example. Of course, it goes beyond that with what the community provides. Also for the games, for example, for the updates that we've done, a lot of that has come from the feedback that was provided by the caregivers, by the partners who are in this community, by children who are the center, of course. When it comes to devices, for example, it has been always through local procurement, through the solutions that partners provided, that we were able to make it happen and to bring in technology. At the same time, providing devices, solar panels, for example, has been also of benefit in these communities. So it has gone beyond using the solar panels, for example, for charging tablets. It was also put in use for community services like teachers or people in the community coming at night, charging the phones. There have been also some nice initiatives like in Eastern Chad. They did what the team called back then with our partners, the JRS Cinemaville, where also children could come and watch movies, and then also some contributions could be done, which would be used later for the implementation of the program.
Can I just add one point to Marwa, and because it's such an important question, and maybe within the community, especially caregivers, because how do we go about tackling some of the barriers towards education? So even if you have education solutions or schooling functioning, how do we get the children to access that education? And that speaks to your earlier point as well. And I think the caregivers play a crucial role here. And what we try to do, again, is take a systemic approach. So if we have an intervention that works, then also how do we make sure that children actually access that intervention, such as Can't Wait to Learn? So Jasmine Turner, who's in the audience today, has been actually developing an intervention or a strategy to engage caregivers to work with children to get them to access an intervention such as Can't Wait to Learn or education at large, and to increase retention. So to get caregivers involved in enrollment, to get caregivers and children involved in homework exercise, exactly in order to overcome some of the barriers. So I think the community at large, but especially caregivers, play a really important role.
I'm going to try and squeeze in a two-part question in the minute or so that we have left, and they may be related. Are there places in the world that you really would like to be, feel capable that you can be right now, but that you're not? And how do you plan to use the proceeds of your award?
I could speak to the second question very briefly, and maybe others can. Part of the And the Yidan Prize, what we're using, is actually reaching more children in Lebanon, but also in other places, so definitely scaling up. Second of all is to continue our research efforts. We've now demonstrated that it works. It's an evidence-based intervention. We do want to know more, and we especially want to use it to know how does the intervention work? How does Can't Wait to Learn lead to better outcomes? And if we know how it does, we can also start optimizing it. We can better implement it. It can maybe become even more efficient. So looking at issues of dosage, looking at issues of training, looking at issues of delivery. So once we know better what mechanism are actually predicting better outcomes, we can really work towards improvement. So we'll really use it for those two things. Scale up and further research.
Very briefly, on your wish list of where you'd like to go next?
I think there are many countries in need of programs like Can't Wait to Learn. So the answer would be many places, but I would say for now Gaza is, Palestine is one of the places where there's a huge need. For now, I don't think that it's the right time to start with a program like Can't Wait to Learn, because children are just trying to survive before thinking of education or something else. But at a later stage, it would be very important, of course, to bring in a program like Can't Wait to Learn. And on that, I'd like to say something, because it would feel bad to me leaving without mentioning that. It's amazing, I think, being here and talking about education and all the responses that we can do and how we can support the children. But I also hope that we can go beyond that. We can work on the root causes. We can do more of advocacy towards children's rights and doing some influence around stopping conflict, which is putting us in a place where we are responding to this conflict. I think this is something that would keep any one of us awake at night if we put ourselves in children's shoes and what they're suffering, whether in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Sudan, in Myanmar, in many other places. I will not say excuse me if this makes me emotional, but again, this is something I feel I can't live here without talking about. So I hope that we can take this step further when it comes to children's education and rights.
Well, there you have it. You have agents of hope. And in my business, we call you solutions-oriented characters in the stories that we report. And I have really enjoyed our conversation and wish you all the best, as I'm sure do everyone else in this audience. Thanks very much, Yidan, Marwa Zahr, Luke Stannard.
Thank you again.